2000 F150 4-wheel drive with the 5.4 Triton. Just bought this. Got a pretty good deal on it because there's a good chance the motor's pooched on it. They said the heater core ruptured, lost its coolant, overheated. They've bypassed the heater core and the crankcase filled up full of water, so they're assuming blown head gasket, which is definitely a possibility. But what I noticed myself when I was pressurizing the radiator, I was getting coolant or water coming from the intake manifold here on the right side, which apparently is not uncommon for this engine, and I'm sure overheating it didn't help. So I haven't checked yet to see if there's a way the water can get from there and into the block, or if that's completely sealed off. It's possible I still have a bad head gasket as well as the intake manifold gasket, but I thought I would do the intake first and just hope for the best, but there's a good chance I'll be tearing it apart again. It's not knocking, still has good oil pressure. It is misfiring, so I'm going to have to check the injectors and the coils. I will do the spark plugs while I have it this far down, and I'll clean it up and put the intake back on. Noticed a couple things here on the intake though. On this side, and this is about where it was leaking from when I pressurized it, there's some kind of sealant on there. So I don't know if that is from somebody trying to fix the problem. It looks a little old for that. Maybe somebody just had this crossover off before and sealed it up. I'll disassemble it some more to see. And then over on the thermostat side, a large part of that seal has actually entered that passage there, so I don't know if that means coolant was getting into the intake, which if it was would explain the misfire. So yeah, I'm going to pull this crossover apart and inspect this a little closer and see what's going on in there. I don't like the idea of a plastic intake, but we're in a very disposable world today. It does have its minor pluses, because the alternative is the 390 in my 69 F250. That intake weighs 70 pounds, so this is a breeze compared to that. But obviously this one's not going to live to be 50 years old. Okay, I just cleaned this sealant or JB Weld out of the intake. Looks like JB Weld, epoxy of some kind. I don't see a crack on the intake, but what I do see is what looks like a gap there between the crossover and the intake. So that's probably what somebody was trying to seal up once upon a time, trying to get it fixed without having to pull the intake. In fact, I wonder if that might even be what went in the first place, and they were wrong about their heater core diagnosis. So I'll have to put some pressure on that heater core and see if it holds or not. But yeah, my next step is to pull this crossover off. I think this is where all the leaks are. Still could be a head gasket problem, obviously. When they overheated it, my problems could be deeper than that. The underside view of that seal from the crossover that punctured out. Definitely some leak problems here. So this is the underside of that crossover. This is that part of the gasket or seal that failed and entered the waterway. Then the other side here, This is where that JB weld was at. All that gasket was, or seal was missing, and they just filled up that area with JB weld. I also noticed something else over here too. I thought a lot of this was rust I was looking at. I don't think so. I think that's radiator stop leak, which never works. Don't use that stuff. Bad. Now the other side shows us why it failed. This is that channel that seal is supposed to sit in, and there's a big chunk of it missing. Same thing on this side where it went inward. Channel, nothing, just a big chunk of it gone on both sides. I gather this is a common problem from what I was reading on the Ford Trucks forum. Also, Dorman has a replacement intake, which is supposed to be an improved design over this one. However, I hadn't intended on replacing intakes at this point. It would be kind of pointless to put that back on. And since it's a trouble area, I imagine anything I get at the wrecking yard is going to have the same issue. And pulling these intakes off of a 5.4 is no easy feat. But definitely some issues here. Yeah, and that piece is missing. That's right where that JB weld was built up. Yeah, like that. Isn't it stupid? The problems that plastic gives you. Cleaned the head surfaces, replaced all the spark plugs, did a compression check. Compression could have came out better. They were all 120 or higher, so there's no dead cylinders. That's good. It just could have been a little more even. I had a pretty wide gap between my lowest and highest, but at least there's no dead cylinders, so that's a start. And it could even out once it gets a chance to break back in again too. Spark plugs. I don't know if you can see that. That shows up well. It's not gapped large because it's worn. The gap is actually proper, but since these are not the correct spark plugs, these are Autolites 103s, to get the proper gap on it, they had to bend the electrode way high. It gives it the appearance of being badly worn. So there was some discussion I've seen on the forums between whether or not you should use the Autolites or stick with the Motorcraft. So I think this kind of concludes it to me that it needs the Motorcrafts, because that'll work, but that's not proper. So glad I changed those. This is the new intake. This is the Dorman replacement. Supposedly the Dorman replacement has new and improved features over the old ones. Hopefully that means they've reinforced the ribs where the crossover goes. It's tempting to open that up and look at the crossover and the seals, but I'm going to leave well enough alone. What I do see that's not great, where the Ford manifold has these brass inserts that help hold the coil packs in place. The Dorman unit just has blank holes, and they give you some self-tapping bolts to put in there in replace of the proper bolt. That's kind of cheesy. One big difference I see, and I couldn't tell you if it's really an improvement or not, but the original manifold used a traditional intake gasket. What we're used to seeing on V-type engines. The Dorman uses seals and I don't know if that's an improvement or not. Hopefully so. But what I did notice is the replacement kit for those seals is pretty expensive. I think it's pushing almost $40 for a new set of seals. The original gaskets, I think those are under $20. So anyway, that'll go in soon. Not today. I'm about done for today. There's a little change in the risers too. Yeah. PVC setup's different. This goes right into the bottom of the throttle body. This one just looks like it taps into a runner back here. But I suppose the main thing is if they did fix that breakage problem. That seems to be a pretty common problem on these plastic Ford manifolds from what I've seen on both the 5.4s and the 4.6s. So we live in an era now where an intake manifold's a consumable. Thanks for watching.